All right, in that case, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome to the info session for the Algoverse AI Research Program. My name is Kevin. I'm the founder of the program, and I can tell you a little bit more about what the program is about, some of the past outcomes that we've had, and the journey that the students took to get there. And also, this is a good time to ask any questions. So if you have anything in mind, just at any point, feel free to ask in the chat or the private chat, or you could also unmute if you want. So yeah, let's go get started. So first, I'll start with an introduction of our team. So again, my name is Kevin. In terms of my background, I went to Berkeley for my undergrad, and I was pretty involved in the research and teaching communities. So I was the head TA and lecturer for the algorithms class for about 2 years, and I also did research at Berkeley's RISE lab on deep learning. But then after I graduated, I worked in the industry. So I started out at Citadel doing quantitative research, which is basically applying AI techniques, but to the stock market. And I also did some software engineering. But in 2023, after ChatGPT came out, I decided to go full back into deep learning. So I've been doing this ever since. It's been a really fun journey. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what we've done in the past few years. But let me go ahead and quickly introduce some of the other people on our team. So in terms of our directors, we have Archana, Antonio, Ryan, and Dev. Archana is our main program director. So she also will be helping out with running the logistics. So anything to do with managing the projects and the teams and logistics, she'll be the main point of contact. Antonio and Ryan help out with managing our research, so really making sure that all of our teams are producing high quality stuff. So they'll be coordinating with our mentors and our PIs to make sure all that happens. And then Dev is our AI safety director, so he helps out with our AI safety program, since we believe that AI has also some potential risks that come along with it. So that's what his role and responsibilities entail. Next, we have our principal investigators. So these are the people who will be guiding the research at the highest level. So we call them PIs. Um, in terms of their backgrounds, we have Vasu. Vasu, we're really grateful to have. He was a lead research scientist at Meta. So if you know Llama 3 or Llama 4 for the language side, or Dino V2, Dino V3 for the vision side, he was the tech lead for pre-training, and he's been in the field for about a decade. He's had thousands of citations, and he's also an area chair at NeurIPS. Area chairs are the people managing the reviewers to give the meta review. So yeah, we're really grateful to have him. He's been helping out with basically all of our projects. You can see he has background in both vision and language, brings a nice wealth of experience. We also have some other researchers at other frontier labs and at universities. So Vivek is at OpenAI. He specializes in post-training, so reinforcement learning for example, reasoning or tool usage. If you remember O1 and O3 from last year, he was pretty involved in that. Callum is at Google DeepMind, and he was previously at Anthropic, and he helps out with interpretability. So any of our projects with that, he'll be helping out with those. She and Reja are professors at GW and Aberdeen, and they help out with our language model projects in general. So yeah, that's our principal investigator team. Again, their role is to make sure that all our projects are novel and are well positioned for the conferences. And then our mentors, these are the people who you'll be meeting with on a more regular basis. So for example, we have a few here, but we have a lot of others not on the slide. Well, Ben is at Stanford Medicine, and he'll help out with our projects that deal with medicine and AI. So uh, yeah, I guess for example, his specialty is in surgery. So if that's something that interests you, like computer vision or robotics for surgery, then that would be, one example. Ivory is at Dartmouth, focusing on languages, especially low resource languages that don't have much training data online. So, for example, some indigenous languages are hard for language models to process. So that's what she focuses on. And then Abby is at Berkeley as a PhD, and she'll help out with computer vision projects. In general, we will match students to mentors based on the topic. So, yeah, I guess the mentor that you get matched with will depend on the team matching, which I'll talk about later in the slide. But yeah, these are just a few. And overall, our team is really passionate about building the field. So definitely reach out to us during the program, and we'd be happy to help. Our philosophy here is that it is really hard to actually learn these deep research skills because it's not really taught in school, but it's a ever more increasingly useful skill to have to be able to solve problems that aren't tightly constrained, like what you would see on an exam or like the SAT or something. To be able to actually, explore an open-ended domain, formulate hypotheses, run experiments, and do real research. So that's the goal of running the program, and it's been really fun. So yeah, I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the outcomes that we've had. So our students in the past have gotten into the top universities and top frontier labs. So OpenAI, Anthropic, DeepMind. These are really competitive nowadays, and we're really glad to have been able to help some of our students achieve those offers. We've also gotten some scholarship awards for some of our students. So if you know the Davidson Fellowship, we've gotten some nice five-figure lump sums from that. So that's been great. So yeah, I'll talk more about how exactly our program works and how our students were able to get those. Okay, so I'll start from a very high level. The high level goal of the program is that we want to publish real AI research at top conferences. That's what we're doing in a nutshell. The goal is to do something that's actually impactful, not just like a small side project. And the main distinction here in our projects compared to other research or other side projects is the aspect of novelty, because that's what distinguishes the papers at the top conferences. So that's our goal. We'll be helping out with the entire process of ideation to implementation and actually submitting it to the conference. And we think, although it is a really ambitious task, it is possible to do this in 2026 because LM research, especially, is quite new because it really only started blowing up after ChatGPT came out. So it's only been a few years old, and compared to most industries, that's really nascent. So as long as you have the mentorship to guide you along with exploring the search space of ideas and also any blockers that come up with in the implementation, like GPU errors or bespoke bugs, this is really doable. And so I can show you some examples of some of our past papers. But yeah, that's like the high level goal. More concretely, the exact thing that we offer, it's a paper, and we have a new thing that we just started doing this past cycle, so for this summer, which is this sort of guarantee policy where basically if you are following along and actually doing what you need to do, then we'll basically just guarantee that you have the paper finished. So, that's something that you can submit. To be clear, though, we don't guarantee the acceptance. That would be not possible because I guess the peer reviewers, the way it works is it's double-blind peer review, right? So you don't know who they are, they don't know who you are. So we definitely can't guarantee this. If someone is guaranteeing this to you, then that's potentially suspicious. So yeah, that's our goal. We want to help you with learning and finish the project, and it should be a good quality paper. We had some good quality results in the past, but that's the specific thing that we offer. It's scoped for 3 months, although sometimes we will end up extending the project if we need to. So maybe the pace is a little bit slower if you ran into some blockers, or maybe the scope of the work is just a little bit larger. So if it needs to be extended to like let's say 4 or 5 months, that'd be fine. But yeah, so that's the goal. Though we have found in the past that the projects are best scoped within a one semester or like one summer timeframe because if it's something more than that, let's say it's 2 months or sorry, 2 semesters, people end up just deprioritizing the project compared to more urgent things. And it turns out like that's actually worse for project completion. And anything lower than that, I guess it's just too tight. So, having a one semester schedule, like roughly 3 months, happens to work well. And this works also well with the conference deadlines. So typically what we end up saying is that the projects will extend basically exactly up until the conference deadline. So I'll talk more about that in a second for what we're aiming for in the summer. But that's just the logistics of how it sort of goes. But yeah, the condition here is that you guys will need to, also be very active. So this assumes consistent participation. The specifics here are that if you miss 4 or more meetings, then this no longer holds. At that point, you might not even get authorship, depending on what your contribution looks like. And also, yeah, if you get any sort of low contribution flags from your teammates or mentor, that's something that we take in mind as well. So we want to make sure that you guys are also actively participating, because you guys will be the ones who are doing the bulk of the work. We're going to be mentoring. The way to think about it is that we're like navigating, whereas you guys are actually driving. So definitely you'll have to be quite committed to actually make things happen as well. Okay, so more about the conferences that we're submitting to. I'm sure this will be a question that might have or a slide that might have a lot of questions. So I'll try to go over this in detail and let me know if there's anything that comes in mind. We will go ahead and try to submit to the top AI conferences. So these are the ones that are professional, the highest ranked conferences in the world for AI. And it's quite different from the other conferences you might be used to if you're like a high schooler, because these are the real deal. So if you take a look at ML, you have NeurIPS, iClitter, ICML, and Triple AI. For NLP, you have ACL, EMNLP, NACL, ASL, Common and Calling. And then for CV, you have CVPR, RCCP, and ECCP. For reference, this is just like colloquially what the top ranked conferences are, but if you take a look at Google Scholar, you'll see that this corresponds perfectly based on H5 index. So H5 is a metric based on the number of citations that a journal gets, which will describe how much impact it's having to other researchers. And so, for example, NeurIPS is number one, and then iClear is number two, and then ICML, triple AI, or for NLP, you have ACL, EMNLP, this is NACL, Colang, ACL. And then for CVPR, or for CV, you have CVPR, ECCV, RCCV, and so on. So yeah, we'll go ahead and aim for those as well. The specific place that we'll submit to will depend on the timeline that you're in, because these will be spread out across the year. At this point in time, it's currently May. The most upcoming conference is actually NeurIPS. The workshops are due in mid-August to mid-September, so the timing works out really well. So that's what we're going to be primarily aiming for. The one after that is triple AI. That one happens in October. So if you need to have a little bit more time to work on it, or if you're joining one of the later start dates, then that would be the other main goal. As for main conferences versus workshops, the way that works is that main conference is a lot larger in scope. So typically, if you're a PhD student, you'll have maybe, let's say, around 2 papers per year into one of these main conferences if you're good and you get accepted. And so the scope is like roughly 6 to 12 months of work. And yeah, it's really competitive. So compared to the workshops, this is a little bit easier compared to the main conference. It still solicits the same types of researchers to submit. So you'll see if you attend the workshop, other researchers from DeepMind, Anthropic, top universities, and these are also specialized based on topic. So there's actually a lot of different workshops associated with the conference, and then you will aim for whatever is like the most relevant topic to your project. Yeah, these are a little bit easier. Typically, it's like around 3 months to get in. When I say easy, I guess it's not that easy still, of course. Obviously, it's still quite hard. You still have to, have a novel project and, pass the peer review. So we'll only submit papers to workshops if we pass the internal PI review, because we don't want to be submitting papers that just aren't going to get accepted and, create noise. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and, primarily aim for workshops. That's what's more realistic for most people. Unless you have a ton of experience, then it might be worth aiming for main. So we are happy to go to main if the project is good enough to do so, and we do have some main conference acceptances, but the main target for at least the first destination will be the workshops. And then more about the conferences. These conferences are very selective. So the number one criteria for how it gets evaluated is novelty. So again, this is what I mentioned in the beginning. That's what really pushes forward the field. You want to do something that people haven't done before, and discover something new, might push forward how people do things moving forward. If you replicate a project, that's always nice, but that's not really, pushing forward the project or pushing forward the field. And so, that's like what the research institutions are looking for. Besides that, also, of course, the science needs to be good. So the experiments need to follow all the conventions. There's a lot of details that go into what benchmarks, what methods, what ablations, what analyses, to make sure that you actually are, technically speaking, demonstrating what you want to show. And then, of course, the paper also needs to be well written too. So it needs to be done academically, has to follow the standards. The way you should think about it is that the paper is kind of like a proof, and then the reviewers are kind of like proof verifiers. The reason for this is because, again, we want to make sure that everything is correct, and that's one of the main benefits of having peer review compared to just, an open publishing scheme. And so that's why, most science nowadays uses this policy. So yeah, everything that you're making, any claim that you make in the paper needs to be supported either by a citation to another paper that shows what you're showing, or by your own experiments. And so, yeah, that's the something that will help out with. If you don't have any prior experience, that's okay. But yeah, that's something that the conferences will need as well. I said this before as well, but we'll emphasize again, no one can make any guarantees about acceptances. The review process is double blind. That prevents any sort of bias or like funny business going on. The processes are pretty meritocratic, although there's a little bit of noise. So it's worth mentioning that the people who are reviewing your papers are humans, right? So sometimes they might either over index on your claims or maybe under index, and it'll depend on the specific reviewer that you get. So there's definitely some stochasticness to it, but that being said, it's pretty meritocratic. So the better the paper, the higher chance it has of getting in. Typically, especially at the highest level, the papers that are best in the paper or best in the conference, they'll have a very low chance of getting rejected, and they'll be definitely making it forward. So yeah, that's the way that the conferences work, and we are quite proud of our track record since we've had roughly 70% of our past teams get accepted. This is compared to a baseline of roughly 30 to 50% acceptance rate of these conferences and workshops. And that is a pool of grad students and professionals. So given that we're bringing high schoolers and college students, we're quite proud of that result. So that's been great. But with that type of selectivity, there's good benefits that come along with it. So starting out with college students or industry grads, the two most common things that you might be aiming for are either grad schools or big tech companies. For grad schools, this is essentially the name of the game. The number one thing that the grad schools are looking for are papers at these conferences. So I guess that's great. There's also other things involved in admissions for grad schools, like your letter of recommendations and also your classes and all that. But the papers and research publication experience is the typical number one thing that they're looking for. And then for companies, this could help, especially if you're doing any sort of ML engineering or ML research role, of course. That's exactly what they're looking for. But it also helps for software engineering roles as well, because there's a lot of overlap nowadays with AI tools, and there's recruiters at all these big tech companies. They will know what these conferences are by name because it's a very strong signal in their mind that you're technically competent at AI and engineering more broadly. And also, this is another thing to mention. If you go to actually one of these conferences, there's a lot of recruiters that will go ahead and directly recruit from there. So, for example, we've had some past students get internship offers at Adobe and other companies from meeting recruiters at the conferences. So, that isn't guaranteed by any means, but it's also a potential avenue for success. As for high school students, the first thing to mention here is that, again, these conferences are very different from what you would expect to see at the high school level. So if you've heard of like ISEF or JEI, these are things that are intended for high schoolers compared to these conferences, which are intended for professionals. So if you take a look at where the top AI labs are publishing, let's say Berkeley, Stanford, and Google DeepMind, you'll see that the list of conferences overlaps precisely. So this is ACL, which is an NLP conference. ICML, CVPR. If you remember from the list before, these are the same acronyms. And for Stanford, you have iClear. This is NACL that's spelled out. And finally, DeepMind, you have all the papers that they had accepted at NeurIPS, and they're very proud of that. So yeah, you can definitely search this up and check out for yourself. And it's quite nice that you'll be at the conferences actually meeting these real researchers from these top universities and top labs. And so yeah, for high school students, a lot of our high school students have, not realized that this is actually not for high school students. And at the end of the day, so when they get to the conference, they get surprised that they are actually the only high schoolers there, and they are the youngest people there. So that's always pretty nice to see and pretty exciting. And the good news is that also admissions officers recognize what these conferences are by name and how much harder it is to get in. Again, the expectation for high schoolers really shouldn't be to submit to these top level conferences. And so this is very unusual. But yeah, if you were to get accepted, then that would be, quite crazy. So this is not something I knew when I first created the program, but a lot of high school students were asking me. So I went ahead and I talked to some admissions officers at some of the top schools, and they basically all unanimously said the same thing, that they recognize NeurIPS and these other conferences by name, and it's very impressive to get accepted there. So I guess that would be great for college apps. But again, beyond college apps, this is what the field is looking for AI research and engineering more broadly. So this is something that you can put on your resume for a long time. And starting early is always great for building a foundation for future in computer science and AI. Okay, one more slide on conferences, and then I'll go ahead and answer some questions. So for reference, for NeurIPS last year, this is again the number one AI conference. We had, out of all of the high schoolers that got accepted to NeurIPS, 76.5% of them did Algoverse. So yeah, again, the denominator is every high school student who got accepted at NeurIPS. Essentially, more likely than not, three quarters of them did Algoverse, and that's how they got into NeurIPS. So we are currently basically redefining the field. This was for NeurIPS 2025. For NeurIPS 2024, it was even higher than this. There was only a few dozen who got accepted to NeurIPS, and then almost all of them, it was like 80-90% did Algoverse. And then the year before that, we didn't exist. So I guess there was basically no high schoolers getting accepted there. So it's incredibly rare if you're a high school student to get accepted. Again, the baseline is that only 0.4% of the NeurIPS attendees are high school students. So, that's quite impressive. If you were to restrict this to just the workshops, this goes from 0.4 to 1%. So it is a little bit higher. But still 1% is quite low, right? So there's only a few hundred in the world who get accepted compared to tens of thousands and who are submitting at the high school level. So that's really something that, would be quite impressive and very unusual. For college students, it's a little bit more common compared to high school students, but it's not that much more common. So this 0.4 goes to somewhere between 10 and 20%. But even then, that's still quite rare. Typically, most people who are getting accepted here are PhD students or already in the industry. So getting in as a undergrad is still quite great for your standing out compared to other undergrads, and applying for grad school and things like that. Okay, so I'll stop for some questions. I know I've been talking for a while. Um, let's see, I'll go through the chat. Or actually, Vibur, if you want to unmute, you can go ahead.
Hi. Specifically on the statistics slide, you mentioned that of all the students, high school students getting admitted, 76.5% were through Algoverse. I would want a reverse statistics as well, which is what percentage of the high school students that opt for Algoverse actually make it to NeurIPS. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. So that was the statistic here. This is not specific to NeurIPS, but this is just any of the top conferences workshops. But roughly 70% of our past teams have gotten accepted in the past. So yeah, I'm not sure what that is for NeurIPS specifically, but I guess somewhere around that range.
So somewhere around 70% or 70% is for all conferences, so probably less than that.
Yeah, so this is for all conference workshops across all the semesters. I'm not sure what it is for specifically NeurIPS, but the selectivity for the different conferences doesn't actually vary that much within this list. So if it's between like let's say NeurIPS, iClear, ICML, these are basically regarded as the same within the field. It's just based on the timeline. So for example, iClear, this is typically for the workshops in the like winter or early spring, or ICML is in like the late spring. So I guess the acceptance rate doesn't vary too much between them. And so that's why I'm saying that it's like roughly around this number. I don't know what the exact number is, but yeah, it should be around there.
Hey, thank you for allowing me to ask questions and stuff, and also thank you for the admission to the program. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
So just like a little bit background about me, I just got my master's, and I just kind of want to use a program like this so I can get into like a PhD program or other cohorts. So how would you do you think this is a good this is a good program to network and get references? Because at my last university and stuff, I don't really feel like I'd done like good research with professors where they would give me good recommendations. Do you think this program's like the right fit for that? And I'm a little bit older on the older side, so I'm in my 30s. So do you think that this program's good for me?
Yeah, it's a good question as well. So we've had some past students also apply for the PhD programs and master's programs and all that in the past cycle and had some good results. As for letters of recommendation, yeah, we're happy to do that as well. So your mentor or your PI that you work with, as long as you have done well on the project, you can ask them for a recommendation. So yeah, that's something that's pretty common within the program. Okay, maybe one more like verbal question for now, and then
I
I'll
have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so when we talk about like any research paper, and like you mentioned that for NeurIPS, there has to be novelty in the paper, something new. So when let's say the participants come up with a research paper and the mentors will help them. So my question is that uh, is the idea of the paper something that the participants are supposed to come up on their own, or will the mentors give them the idea and frame the experiment and frame the experiment and tell them how to run the experiment, and the participants will do the experiment, or are the participants in a particular cohort expected to come up with a novel idea on their own? Because for a research paper you have to just see where the gap lies, what has not been done before, and find a gap and then propose a novel idea and then frame an experiment and then design the experiment and see the results and publish those. So are participants supposed to come up with a novel idea on their own, or is that something where the mentors will give them the idea?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I'll talk more about this later in the slide, but to answer your question quickly, it could be from either the students or from the mentor or some combined effort in between. So for
Yeah,
example,
and also just one small follow-up. So if the idea has to come from the participants, in that case, is it expected that the participants should have a broad enough knowledge of the topic, and only then will they? So do the participants have to first read up and study the topic in depth first before coming up, so that they are able to come up with an idea, or how is that? Because I guess knowing the topic in detail would be a prerequisite for coming up with a new idea, right?
yeah, so I'll talk more about this in a bit, but again, it's pretty flexible here. So in the first 4 weeks or 5 weeks of the program, we have ideation as like our main goal of the program. That's actually a dedicated phase of the program. And so you can either come up with some ideas before the program begins, or in the first few weeks, you can read through some papers, think of some ideas. You can get feedback from our PIs and our mentors on, how to shape that into something more novel or follow the conventions and things like that. So yeah, it doesn't have to be necessarily a very fleshed out thing before you start. We can help you with the intermediate process of actually getting there.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, just for sake of time, I'm gonna go skip through the chat questions for now, just because I also think that after I go through more of the slides, it'll answer some more of the questions. But I'll wrap back at the end to cover some of the rest of these questions in the chat. So yeah, everything I just mentioned before are is context about the different conferences. But you might be asking, what does the research actually look like? So I'll give you some examples of what that looks like in practice. So here's one paper called Semantic Self-Consistency. This was accepted to a NeurIPS workshop 2 years ago. And the paper at a glance was basically about extending this method called self-consistency, which was a method from Google DeepMind on evaluating language models and improving reasoning, where they would go ahead and instead of asking the model once, they would ask it multiple times, and then they would take a majority vote on the final answer. And so something that was showing it more often is considered more like self-consistent, right? And then so that would typically lead to higher accuracies. And so what we did was we changed up the method a little bit, because if you do a majority vote, then that's only taking a look at the final answer. And the models actually go ahead and give the reasoning as part of the response. That's called chain of thought. So what we did instead was we went ahead and tried to weigh the reasoning paths semantically. So based on the actual reasoning, if you were to try to project that into some vector space of the semantics, maybe there are some reasoning chains that are more similar. Maybe there are some reasoning chains that degenerated and hallucinated off some random path. And if you do some sort of consistency metric based on the semantics, maybe this will do a little bit better. And turns out it actually did do quite a bit better, depending on the results were a bit noisy, but depending on the benchmark, sometimes it got a 13% higher accuracy with the same amount of compute. So that was quite great, it got accepted. And it turns out that the other thing that was cool was that about a year later, it actually got featured by OpenAI as part of their paper bench. So paper bench is if you haven't heard of it before, it's a benchmark from OpenAI to see how well can AI evaluate AI research and replicate AI research. Which is important because if AI agents can replicate AI research, then you can get recursive self-improvement where you have these models all doing AI research. So what they did was they took 22 papers from ICML and NeurIPS and tried to replicate them with their AI agents. And out of the other 21 papers, these are all sort of, if you take a look at the list of authors, they're all top professionals from different PhD students or different AI labs. But yeah, one of the 22 groups happened to be a group of 4 high school students at the time. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, the lead author, our student Tim, was able to actually coordinate and work with OpenAI for 6 months. So they reached out to him and they worked with him on actually getting their models to work. And yeah, it was really cool. So this is not something that I knew either when it first came out, because he had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, like NDA. But yeah, I was really excited when that came out. And so that's just like an example of one of our papers that have had real impact. This is an example in the domain of LLM reasoning, but it doesn't have to necessarily be that, but that's just one example. One other example is this paper called Scratchpad Thinking. So this was a paper that we had this past year at the Mechanistic Interpretability Workshop, and it was also awarded the Spotlight Award, which is awarded to the top some sort of fraction of the accepted papers. So that was pretty great. What we did here was that so in most models, you have the chain of thought, which is a explicit natural language explanation of what it's thinking. But in some models that some researchers have developed, they're actually called latent reasoning models, where they don't use chain of thought and they think fully internally. So these are a lot harder to interpret, right? Because they're not speaking in English. It's all in these mathematical vectors within the model. And what we did was we were one of the first papers to find any sort of understanding of how these actually work. So what we did was we found that the even number steps, like the even number latent reasoning steps, store numerical information, while the odd number steps perform operations, which might seem like that's like a very small finding, because it's don't these model creators know how the models are working? But it turns out the model creators have like actually no idea what's going on in these models, at least for the latent reasoning models. because the way that AI models are trained is that it's more like it's grown in a lab and less so programmed instructionally. So we had to use a lot of interpretability techniques to actually probe inside the model and understand what's going on. And so that was pretty great. It was a really cool finding where everyone in the internal team were really excited that we were able to find this. This was a team of a bunch of college students plus one returning high school student who was really strong on his first project. And they were able to get the spotlight award, so they were presenting at the front of the workshop. And also after the presentation, Neil Nanda, who is the head of Google DeepMind's interpretability team, actually went ahead and talked to us for about 20 minutes and got the contact information of our students. And then they later worked together and helped Neil and his team publish another follow-up on our work. So that was really great. So they also got cited by DeepMind on being one of the first people to actually understand what's going on in these models. So yeah, this is an example of interpretability. Again, the topic is flexible here, but yeah, that was another project we're quite proud of. Okay, so that's just hopefully some glimpse of our research. Definitely go ahead and check out our research page if you want to look deeper onto some of our past projects. But I'll go ahead and talk more about some of the outcomes because I know that that's probably quite of interest to a lot of people. So first, some like aggregate statistics at the high school level. So yeah, for high schoolers interested in college apps, I guess the statistic that we have been highlighting is that we've had 87% of our published high school seniors who are incoming to a US college, they were admitted to top 10 or top 10 CS schools. This is the union of the two. So for example, a top 10 school could be like Harvard or Stanford, and a top 10 CS school could be like Georgia Tech or UT Austin. And so if you take the union, then yeah, we've had in the past 2 cycles, 87% of our past students get accepted. So that's been really great. We've been really proud of this number. I guess there's some more context to be said about correlation versus causation because obviously the students who are really strong and able to publish at these top conferences are already quite qualified, and maybe without the conference they still would have been able to get accepted at a high proportion. That being said, I guess 87% is a big number. So I guess conclude what you can from there, but that's a result we've been really proud of. And at the college level and industry grad level, we've had a lot of placements at the top companies. So we've had people get full-time offers at OpenAI and XAI, internships at Anthropic and TikTok and Apple, other big tech companies, and also quant firms like Optiver and Jane Street. We've also had a few people get into top PhD and master's programs. So for example, we had one student in this past cycle get into PhD at MIT, which is extremely, extremely selective nowadays because AI is very popular, and I guess MIT is the top school. So yeah, we've been really proud of our results. I'll talk a little bit deeper about some of our specific journeys that some of our students took to get some more context on what they actually did to get there. But at a glance, we've had a lot of great placements, so that's been solid. So starting out with Abe and Philip at the high school level. So these were two of our students who got the 2025 Davidson Fellowship. So the Davidson Fellowship, for context, is a scholarship across the U.S. for people under 18 years old, and this applies to your college tuition fee, and it's really selective. So only around 20 students across the world or across the U.S. were accepted from over 1,200 applicants, and this is across different domains. So it's not just CS or AI. This is everyone. And so actually for their division, which was I guess the umbrella of technology, they tied for number 1. So pretty cool. The winner of Davidson, came from Algoverse the past year. Their paper was called OnDive, and it was accepted to MLP findings, which is within the main track. And it was also cited by Microsoft, Google, Stanford, CMU, Columbia, Oxford, and UW. And yeah, I guess that was really great. So they've had some great results after. Philip also got the Coca-Cola scholarship, which is another $20,000. And he was admitted to both Harvard and Stanford. So, this is a good problem to have, to choose between those two. So yeah, it was a really hard choice, but he eventually committed to Stanford. So he'll be attending there in the fall. Abe also had some great results after. So the first thing to mention is that if you do really well in the program, we're happy to give you a return offer. So nowadays, actually, our merit scholarships, our funds are typically mostly given to students who have already done the program before. And because I guess, on our end, we have high signal, we know that the students are like some of our top students have already done really well, and we'd like to have them come back compared to the signal that you get from like an application process, like a resume. So that's been really strong. And he came back with a full scholarship and got another main conference paper at MLP. And then he also got some startup internships. So if you've heard of Cluely, he interned at Cluely, and then also another YC startup. And then he also got research internships at Stanford with Professor Yi-Chin Choi, who is one of the top figures in the field, and then also MIT and University of Michigan. For full disclosure, I helped him get the University of Michigan position because I have a connection with the University of Michigan's SLED lab, but he was able to get the other two all by himself. So that was really great too. But the thing that I want to emphasize more compared to just the accomplishments that they had was the journey that they took to get there, because that is hopefully potentially insightful on what you could do in the program to also see that type of success. In this case, the thing I really want to emphasize was that Abe was an extremely hard worker who came from a very less experienced background. So compared to actually all of our students, he might have been one of the least experienced ever to do the program, because he joined the program in spring 2024. And back then we were less selective in our admissions. So he didn't even have any coding experience. He had no coding experience, no AI experience, no research experience. And he was able to, have this extremely high sloped trajectory to get to where he is right now. And the way he was able to do it was that he worked really hard. So I was his direct mentor back in the day. And, I would be with him in the beginning. I was not really expecting much because he was still asking some basic questions on object-oriented programming and how to actually even just use libraries. But by the end, he was stronger than most students because he was probably spending at least 20 hours a week, every week, doing the research, reading papers, iterating on the code. And so he had this so this was, again, he was a new researcher, so he didn't even use GitHub. He actually had a Google Drive with a ton of different Colab scripts. The code was pretty messy at the beginning, but he was able to get everything done, and he was, really impressive. And anyways, so I guess the main takeaway is that, if you work really hard, you can have a really fast slope, and that matters more compared to the y-intercept from where you got started. So again, this is you have to be very high agency. You have to work really hard. So it's not guaranteed by any means that you'll have this type of result. But if you work really hard, then you can potentially have these types of outcomes. I'll answer more questions at the end. I'm just gonna try to speed through some of the rest of these slides just to make sure we have the rest of the time covered. So that's an example of a high school student and their journey. Another example will be for industry grads. So this is Vishnu. He goes by Vishnu. So he was a software engineer at another company called Retool. And then through the program, he was able to get the offer at OpenAI. So for context, he did the program in spring 2025, and he was already quite committed at that point to transition into an AI role, because in the semester before, fall 24, he had applied to master's programs. And his goal was to do a 2 years master's and then get well positioned from the master's program to convert into an AI position. So he applied for the master's in fall 24. He did the program in spring 25. And then in the program, he got published at NeurIPS and Column, which are 2 top conferences. He was really strong. Typically, we only add students to one team, right? That's just the way the program works. But there was another team that was struggling, and I noticed that out of all the students in the cohort, Vishnu was extremely strong. He was sending these really detailed results and always very active in the channel. I decided to go ahead and just add him to a second team. And then that turned out to be a really, really great choice because he was able to get accepted to both. Helped carry the other team as well. And he was able to get the OpenAI offer directly after Algoverse. So initially that wasn't the plan. He was planning on doing the master's, but after he got accepted, he figured he'll just go ahead and try to apply there and do the interviews, see what happens. And he got the offer. So then after the first semester at UCSD, he just dropped out. And so now he's at OpenAI full time. And what he said was that the program provided the technical foundations that he was missing and the hidden knowledge around how research actually works. So what conferences worked, or what conferences matter, how peer review works, how to just do real research. So that was something we're really quite proud of. Again, something I want to emphasize here is that Vishnu was really self-motivated. Even without Algoverse, I'm sure he would have eventually been able to break into a frontier lab because he committed to leave his full-time salary and pay more money at a master's program, right? He was really committed to getting into AI. And so we just helped him fast track that. So, given his motivation, we gave him the resources, we helped him, paired him up with a mentor. His mentor was at Meta at the time, working as an ML engineer. And, they were able to iterate fast, work really well. And he was able to speed up his journey there. Okay, one more example, but for the college students. So this is McNair. McNair also did the program in spring 2025. And he was at the time a high school senior. So at that point, he already got accepted to different colleges. And he was choosing, actually, he was asking me quite a lot back in the cohort about what to choose because he was stuck between Caltech versus CMU. Well, he eventually decided CMU. So he was a freshman at CMU for this past fall semester. But then he also decided to take a gap semester because he applied for the Anthropic fellowship and was able to get in. So he's been at Berkeley ever since, and now he's been working with Anthropic. And again, Anthropic is extremely hard to get into. Anthropic is potentially the most selective tech company right now compared to it's either Anthropic or Jane Street, and so that was really impressive. And the research he worked on was called Death by a Thousand Directions, which was an interpretability paper, something AICP related, and that was exactly what he branched off of in the internship at Anthropic, which is also interpretability and AICT. And yeah, I guess what he said was Algoverse was a great program. The mentors and the students are really talented, and it's a good incubator for future researchers. So yeah, I'm really happy about this too. Again, I want to emphasize that McNair was a really strong student in the program. He was sending really detailed Slack messages that had not just like what he did, but also his thoughts on what it meant, which I thought was really, really nice to see. So he would post these like graphs and these tables, and he would describe actually what his theories were on, what was actually going on in the data. And yeah, very strong student. He was working closely with his mentor, Will, who was also at Anthropic. And yeah, it worked out quite well. So yeah, that's just another example of someone who has, gotten a great outcome. But I guess again, I want to emphasize that Victor is also a really talented student. I think that he would have succeeded no matter what. We just helped him, get there a little bit faster. He was also very high agency, a very, very bright person. Okay, actually, I realized there's one more example. So I'll highlight Ryan and Ayush. Ryan and Ayush were two of the students in the paper bench paper, semantic self-consistency. And it's not what you would see every day to get featured by OpenAI. So they both got accepted to Stanford. Ayush got off the waitlist after writing about Algoverse in his letter of continued interest, and then Ryan got in directly. Ryan also got into Caltech and a bunch of other top schools, UPenn, UC Berkeley. And for Caltech, the dean of admissions actually said that the faculty were impressed with his research and to come explore Caltech. So I thought that was really quite cool. I didn't know that they did that. But yeah, it was really quite impressive, especially because Ryan and Ayush are two students from the most competitive pools. Ryan is a Asian male applying for CS from the Bay Area, and then Ayush is from an international student from India needing financial aid. So yeah, really, really quite impressive that they were able to get in. Okay, I guess a few more slides on some past outcomes that we've had. My favorite part of the program, honestly, is when people will go ahead and message me afterwards about the things that they accomplished, and it always makes me really happy that we've been helping them out. So yeah, we've had some students get into Yale, MIT, Berkeley, other top schools, Stanford. This was the student I was talking about earlier who got the internship at Adobe. And yeah, he published at his conference, NACL. This was back in early 2025. And yeah, he connected to a recruiter at the event. At this point, he already did the internship and I got the return offer. So now he's working full time as a ML engineer at Adobe. And so he was previously a master's student at Northwestern, and now he's an ML engineer at Adobe. Some more examples. So the student Avigia was awarded the Generational Google Scholarship, which is a $10,000 award. And apparently his main research essay was about Algoverse, so that was pretty cool. That was always also a really proud moment. More Stanford, CMU. Okay, but yeah, that's a glimpse of some of our outcomes. Hopefully that gives you a better picture of the things that you can accomplish if you work really hard. If you want to check out more, definitely check out our website. We have 2 pages on there that have some more examples. There's the header, I think it's called News and Impact, has some other outcomes. And then the community tab has some more outcomes plus their words along with it as well. Okay, but yeah, now let me go ahead and talk more about the meat of the actual program, how the program actually works, the details of everything. We've got about 10 minutes here, so I'll try to go on a pretty fast pace, but not too fast. So let me know if you have any questions, and I'll also be happy to stay longer for any questions. Okay, so the program at a glance, again, it's roughly 12 weeks, so that we can go a little bit longer, and there's 3 phases. So we split it off in this way. The first phase is foundations and ideation. So here we'll start with actually learning how AI works. We will start from scratch. So even if you have no prior background in AI or research, that's fine. We'll start with what even is a neural network, how do transformers work, what is training, gradient descent, and so on. We'll go deeper from there. So we have some coding assignments on, if you take a look here, we have some coding assignments on using different libraries like Hugging Face and PyTorch. Hugging Face is for using open source models and data sets, and then PyTorch is for model training, and then also how to structure research code. We'll have some papers for getting a brief glimpse on the literature. So some foundational papers like chain of thought. Also some more specific lectures on different subfields. So this will be in week 2. We'll have lectures on different topics like interpretability. And the reason why we do this is because although the field is quite new, right, it's only been a few years since LLMs came out and became popular. The thing is, there's a lot that has been done in the past few years. So to get started with different topics, you want to have some survey onto what has already been done and what the techniques are. So for example, interpretability, you should know the different standard techniques like linear probes, sparse autoencoders, maybe attribution fetching, and also some of the recent literature, right? So maybe like emergent misalignment, subliminal learning. These are all important things to know before you really go deeper. I should mention that the lectures all get front-loaded in the first 2 weeks. This is a little bit different from how we used to do it, but the reason why is because, again, the field's moving really fast, and we want to front-load everything so you have a good foundation for ideation. So the first week will be all these different fundamental topics, and the second week will be advanced topics on different subfields. So be ready for during the week, maybe like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'll have different lectures on different topics, but this will just be for the first 2 weeks. If you can't make any lecture for whatever reason, they're recorded. So you can watch it on Slack later. We'll post the recording. And or if you just live in a time zone like Singapore where the timing just doesn't make sense, then yeah, you could just watch the recording. So that's what typically our students from Asia will do. Okay, but yeah, so that would be the first 2 weeks. We'll be learning the foundations. I guess more like first 4 weeks. These will happen simultaneously. Then we'll do team matching. So we'll have you submit a team matching form in the first 2 weeks, and we'll ask you a lot of different things, such as like your prior background and your topics of interest. I'll talk more about this in a second, but that's when we'll go ahead and create the teams. And the rest of the first phase is coming up with the idea. So working with your mentor and thinking on your own, reading a lot of papers, trying to understand what do you actually want to do. How do you find something novel? I think there's sometimes a misconception that you can just kind of pick an idea and start working on it, but that's just not how it works. Because you have to do something novel, and to come up with something novel, you have to have a good understanding of what has already been done. So a lot of this is just reading up on the field and understanding how it's working. Then from there, you want to try to branch off into a different direction. Like what are the current research gaps that people haven't been tackling? Can you think of any methods that will go ahead and actually address the gap? So yeah, that'll be all something that you can do with your mentor. You'll iterate with them. You can meet with the PIs. They'll be helping out as well. And eventually at the end of the 5th week, or sometimes the timeline will vary, but the goal is by the end of the 5th week, we'll have a finalized proposal. I'll describe exactly what you want to do. And then in the phase 2, go ahead and actually do it. So you'll go ahead and take the proposal and actually write the code. You'll run the experiments, run the baselines, do the analyses, run the statistics, and iterate. So you'll start with something small, and then you'll want to scale up to all the different benchmarks, different models, because you want to show generalizability beyond just like a single data point or of a specific model and data set combination. Because of course these are empirical projects. The way the field works right now is that the empirics are way ahead of the theory. So these computational experiments, to get strong statistical significance, you need to actually run it on a lot of different combinations of models and data sets. So yeah, that's all part of the second phase. You also want to analyze and interpret what's actually going on in these experiments, have some more visualizations, other types of graphs. Then once you finish all that, you'll go ahead and actually write the paper. So this will be at the end. You could do some of this in parallel, of course. Like you can write some of the introduction and related works before actually finishing the rest of the code. But yeah, I guess roughly speaking, there'll be these 3 phases. We'll go ahead and actually write that paper. If you haven't written a paper before, that's totally fine. We'll have a lot of resources on our end on teaching how to write academic writing, and also our PIs and mentors will be iterating with you on the paper as well. So given that the mentors and PIs will also be having authorship on the paper, they want to make sure that the quality is really high as well. So they'll be also taking a look and making sure that it looks good. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and submit it. So the submission, again, I guess we've written this down as week 13, but it'll really depend. It'll depend on the deadline of the conference or the workshop. What we've seen in the past is that people will end up working basically exactly up until the deadline of the workshop. That's essentially human nature. Maybe like 10 to 20% of our teams will finish early. But yeah, everyone else will go ahead and on the day of the deadline, maybe even 11 p.m. of the day of the deadline, they'll go ahead and actually finish the paper. So yeah, get ready to work for maybe a few more weeks after the program ends to make sure it's fully final. Okay, and again, these are the different start dates. Our May 24th cohort is closing very soon, given that it's starting, I guess, this Sunday. And then the June 6th cohort is probably also closing soon, just because we've had a good amount of enrollments recently. Okay, so that's the across the different weeks. As for within a week, the way it works is that there are two types of meetings. So there are the lectures. We call these like lecture check-ins. Essentially, these are work sessions with their team that happen once a week on the weekend. So our program director, Archana, or I will go ahead and give some announcements, make sure people are keeping on track, and then you guys will go ahead and go into breakout rooms. Sometimes there's other content that's covered, such as like closer to the paper writing phase, we'll talk about paper writing. Closer to the experimenting phase, we'll talk about how to actually use the GPUs. Oh yeah, for reference, we'll be covering any sort of cost that comes along with using GPUs or APIs, as long as it's within reason. So I guess there are some things that are out of scope. For example, you're not going to be training GPT-6. That costs literally trillions of dollars, so you'll need venture capital funds for that. But for anything else, basically, as long as it's within a few $1,000s of spend, we'll be able to cover that. We'll prefer that goes lower than that though. So hopefully we could be doing it within the hundreds. But I guess we'll work on that on a case by case basis, and there'll be processes along with getting reimbursements and things like that. But anyways, so that'll be part of the work sessions. We'll be covering some extra content that you might need for the given week and giving some announcements. You'll work with your team, and then the check-ins. These will be with your team. And this will be specific to just like you and your mentor and your team, typically twice a week. Or worst case, if the scheduling is really hard, then you could do one longer session per week. So the duration is pretty flexible. Timing is also quite flexible. It just depends on when you guys are all free. And your availability will also be one of the conditions that we use for team matching. So we'll make sure that you guys actually are able to meet with your team. So yeah, as for what is discussed here, this will be basically whatever needs to be discussed to push the project forward. So weeks 1 through 4, ideation, giving feedback, shaping your ideas. And then for the implementation phase, this could be anything for the actual implementation. So how to structure the code base, how to debug any sort of bug, how to, what libraries to use, things like that, or interpreting the results, figuring out the next steps. So yeah, this will be whatever you discuss with your mentors and how you get to really push forward the project. But one thing I want to emphasize is that you shouldn't be using just this. You should also be communicating beyond the meetings. And the platform that we use for the program is Slack. So if you've never used it before, Slack is basically like Discord, but just more professional. So a lot of companies nowadays are using Slack. Basically, you have different channels for different things. So we'll have some for announcements, some for lectures, and so on. And then also one for your team. We recommend that you talk there, so you can meet with your team, talk with their mentor, and also so we have visibility. But if you want, you could create a separate channel. So you could use like iMessage or Instagram DM or whatever you want, and you guys can talk there as well. So a lot of our teams will go ahead and do that too. Okay, so that's most of what I wanted to say for how the program works on a day-to-day level. We recommend that you spend roughly 5 to 10 hours a week on the project. The time is pretty flexible, and it's really what you make out of it. So we'd recommend doing more if you can. My personal recommendation will be maybe like 8 to 15 hours, or maybe even more if it's like the summer and you don't have much else on your plate. You can really go deep on there. What we've seen is that the students who have spent more time have better results, of course, and they also just learn more. It's a better investment. And this is also one of those things where the time investment that you put in does have a high return on the investment. This is not true for some things like school. Like, for example, if you already have an A in some class that doesn't matter too much, putting in a bunch of extra time to try to get for an A+, typically is not that worth it. That's very different in this program. If you have an A, or if you have spent like 5 hours, but you can spend 10 hours, that could be a huge difference on the investment that you get out of it. So really we do recommend spending as much time as you can, and this should probably be one of your main priorities when you're doing the program. So in that semester, if you're taking a bunch of other classes, doing a bunch of other internships or whatever, generally don't recommend doing that. You might overestimate your capability on how much time you have. But if you want to do the program, make sure you have enough time to actually contribute, and that'll be best for everyone. So it'll be good for yourself, for the policies that we have, for the guarantees, and better for your teammates, better for everything. So that's what I recommend there. Just for the sake of time, I know I see 2 of you guys have your hands raised. I'll enter it soon. There's only a few more slides left, and I'll go ahead and take questions at the end. So just 2 more slides on the logistics of things. So as for how the teams are created and the swap process, So in the first 2 weeks, again, we will send out the team matching form. You guys can fill it out. We'll ask you a lot of different things. So what topics you're interested in, if there's like a strict constraint or if it's a soft constraint. Most of our students don't have very strong preferences on what topics they want to work on because it's hard to have a really strong preference if you're not that experienced. But if you have a strong experience and strong preference, definitely let us know. Also, your experience level. So we'll match high schoolers with other high schoolers, undergrads with other undergrads, and then college students with other college students. Oops, or I meant industry grads with other industry grads. And then for region, just to make sure you guys can actually communicate and work well with each other. Typically we'll put students from Asia with other students from Asia, and then Europe and Americas, and mostly within the regions. The swap process is that if you want to swap at any point, you can reach out on Slack, and then we can just move you onto a different team. This is not very common. Typically, we'll see maybe like 5% of teams or 5% of students at most actually request a swap. But if you want to request a swap, then you could, and we can move you to a different team. So maybe let's say the team that you're working on decide to branch off a different direction from what you're interested in. You can go to somewhere else. So we have some flexibility there. But yeah, so the team matching will be based on the form. I'll try to find you with other students that are interested in the same topics, have the same backgrounds and same skill levels, things like that. And if you have anyone that you know beforehand, like let's say your friend also enrolled at the same time, you can list it down, and as long as it's bidirectional, like as long as they are also listing you too, that you want to work together, then we'll be happy to guarantee that you guys will be placed with each other. Okay, and then as for the authorship on the resulting paper, this is based on contribution. So whoever does the most will get the first position on the paper, and it will go down the list. There could be ties. It's not going to be a very strict thing. So if it's like roughly the case that 2 people contribute the same amount, you can also denote that with an asterisk. This is the convention in academia. You can have the footnote describing that as equal contribution. The students go at the front, and then the mentor/PI go at the back. It should be good news that the mentor and PI are on the paper in the first place, because that implies a certain amount of involvement on their end, right? Given that this is also going to be public information for themselves, they want to make sure that the quality of the papers are, and that they'll be able to actually have a good reflection upon themselves. As for the program directors, we used to add our program directors, such as myself, onto the paper, although we decided not to do that anymore. Yeah, I guess I've been less involved on the research nowadays. So if you still want to, you could, but you definitely don't need to. So yeah, you don't need to list Algoverse as an affiliation if you don't want. But if you do, that'd be great. It's good marketing for us. So if you want to, definitely feel free, and we'd be happy with that. But we don't care too much about that. Okay, final few slides are what we've shown on LinkedIn. So yeah, definitely check this out if you haven't already. We've had a lot of past students post about their outcomes and their papers and all that. So you can see real alumni and what their stories have been. So for example, we had Hodgson get into Stanford. This student, Calissa, got into ByteDance, which is the parent company for TikTok. This student got into Bear. Bear is a Berkeley AI Research. He's a student at Berkeley. I guess it might not seem that impressive that a Berkeley student got into a Berkeley AI Research Lab, but as someone who went to Berkeley myself, I can tell you that it's extremely competitive to get into the Berkeley AI Research Labs, even as a Berkeley student. So yeah, that was really quite impressive. This student got into Jane Street, and yeah, a bunch of other stuff. Also, if you get accepted to a conference, you can go ahead and actually present there. So that's also really fun. I highly recommend doing this if you can. So we had a lot of people come out to NeurIPS in San Diego last year. Yeah, the experience is great because you can network with other recruiters or other researchers. If you're a high schooler, you can try to find a research position at one of these different labs, or if you're a college student, you can try to get an internship or a research position if you want to go to grad school or something like that. And it's also really fun to just present your work. It's pretty unique to be able to actually present research at a top conference. And you also get to travel, of course, right? So traveling is always nice. It does have to be self-funded. We don't have the funds for this, or else we wouldn't be able to run this program. But you can, as long as you have the ability to pay for the flight and the hotel, you can go ahead and actually present there, which is pretty cool. For reference, NeurIPS this year, there are 3 venues that they are going to co-host with. So there's one in Georgia and Atlanta, or Atlanta and Georgia. And there's also another one in Paris, another one in Sydney, Australia. So yeah, depending on where the workshop is that you're submitting to, you might be able to present in Georgia if you're in the US. So that'd be pretty cool, and hopefully not too far. So yeah, other pictures of people at past conferences, always quite fun, and quite nice to meet people. Okay, so final slide, and then I'll go answer questions. I know you guys have been waiting for a while, so thanks for your patience. So the next steps, if you've been admitted to the program, which I think if you're in the call, you probably have been, the next steps are if you've decided on enrolling, there's a $50 deposit. The instructions are in your portal where you applied, and you can follow the instructions there. If you are not sure and you want to talk more with someone, you could email the admissions team, or you could, if it's something very specific that you think that only I could answer, you can go ahead and send me an email or send me a text. If it's something logistical or operational, you should go email our admissions team. But because I get too many requests, and so I'd recommend doing. It might be the case that if you message me, I might just forward you to the admissions team. But if it's something very specific about like a research question, then you can talk to me instead. And then if you haven't checked out our website, go ahead and check that out, and also fill in this attendance form. So this attendance form is optional, but it'll help me get more feedback on how to improve the session moving forward. So that'd be great too. Cool. So yeah, thanks again for listening to everything, but I'll go ahead and stay for probably a good amount of more time because I know there's a lot of questions to just answer any questions. So yeah, maybe I'll start with, I think, Daniel, I think you're the first to raise your hand if you want to ask.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks. Uh, my questions are just, what's your acceptance rate to like main conferences rather than just workshops? And then, well, like, what is your, you know what, could you answer that question first and then I'll ask the other question because they're kind of different.
Yeah, it's a good question. So most of our teams will not submit to a main conference in the first place. It's just too hard, and the scope is, is larger than what a workshop it would be, right? For 3 months compared to like let's say 6 or 12 months. Out of the people who do submit, yeah, I don't have those stats. I never calculated this, so I'm not really sure. But it's definitely pretty low, I would say, maybe like 20, 30%. But that's kind of a guess because I'm not really sure.
Okay. And then my other question was, is there a process for trying to get a merit scholarship or applying for a merit scholarship?
So there is a merit scholarship application on our portal. I don't know exactly where it is right now, but it should be in the portal somewhere. Yeah, I will say though, it is quite competitive nowadays to get a merit scholarship, just because we allocate most of our funds to returning students. So for reference, to get a merit scholarship nowadays, the recipients who've gotten it recently are, maybe International Math Olympiad or yeah, tons of prior research experience. Like either they are also a PhD student in computer science or software engineer, tech lead at Oracle. Lots of really qualified candidates applying for that.
Okay. All right. Got it. So it's about qualifications for the merit scholarship.
That's right. Well, so I should clarify. That's for like the full merit scholarship. We do often give some partial merit scholarships depending on the signals just in the main application. So that doesn't require any sort of separate process of applying there. But yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yep, no problem. Okay, I'll just go in order on my screen. I think the next person on my screen is Jason.
Yes. Hi, Kevin. I had, sorry for the background noise here. One question is, I did want to speak with you about the scholarship application because I didn't have the practical ability to submit it with my circumstances that I've had the past few days, and so I want to know, if I can submit that for, I guess, a later start date rather than, I guess, May 24th, which I'm willing to postpone because the scholarship is that's going to be very important for me to hopefully get. And then the other question, which is also related to that, is the tuition. Is it if I bring on another teammate, is the tuition split between us, the tuition number that's on your website, or is it per person?
That's a good question. So the first question about could you apply for a later start date? That should be fine. Yeah, I think it would be too late for the May 24th one since it's starting quite soon. But for a later start date, I'm not sure what is still open. Either it would be just the fall, or maybe some of the later summer start dates are open still. So I can talk with our admissions team and see what the situation is there. And for the second question about if you were to join with a teammate, yeah, typically that would involve two different, two different full tuition payments.
Okay, so just to clarify, you accepted me into the you did um grant me admission, but so it's just my question is, can I submit that second form for the scholarship, the merit scholarship? I don't know when, but can I submit that in June or later in May? Because I didn't have the chance to, I didn't have the opportunity to do that. I did get some partial award, I guess based on my finances, but I didn't have the chance to submit the other applications.
Yeah, the short answer to that should be yes. I'm not sure what specific cohort is still open, so that's what I'll have to talk with the admissions team. But you should still be able to apply for something later down the line.
Okay, thank you.
Well, okay, no problem. Uh, okay, next on my screen is Shaginth.
Hey, so this is a little bit continuation of before. So I actually do have like experience with mathematical proofs and a lot of machine learning and stuff. For me, my concern is I want to get the recommendations and want to get the exposure that I need to get into like PhD programs. Obviously, I'm not like greedy where I want to go straight for like the top PhD programs. I know how difficult they are, but for me, like even getting into University of Michigan or like some other really good school, for me, it's like finding the right advisor to do machine learning research because that's what essentially what I want to do. So is this a good program to springboard me into those type positions? Because I don't know if those examples that you gave already had like prior like teach like network of teachers or prior like research experience and stuff like that. So for me, like I didn't make the connections at my university in my undergrad and master's. I didn't know what I want to do with my life. So I regret kind of not doing that early. So I'm hoping to use this program to really, get those network in order to get into research.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, yeah, actually, that's pretty interesting that you mentioned University of Michigan. We actually had a student from the Winter 24 cohort get into a PhD at University of Michigan with an NSF fellowship. I will say that he also did research at his university as well, so it wasn't just us. But yeah, I guess to answer your question more broadly, we are happy to give you recommendation letters. We've had, other past students get into different masters and PhDs. Um, it would definitely help to also do other research on, in addition to Algoverse, because for PhD applications, you need three letters of recommendation typically, right? And for Algoverse, you'd have like your PI would be the main person who has like a high enough, I guess, like research credential to give the recommendation.
Yeah, that's
But
what I was getting at. Because you're right, there's three letters of recommendation. Even the industry fellowships, they ask for three letters of recommendations. So I was
right.
wondering if this would give you opportunities to network maybe on the conferences for getting those other two letters of recommendations.
Yeah, it's a good question. So to answer at the end of the day, I guess my recommendation is that you would have, if you want to specifically aim for PhD, master is a little bit easier, but if you want to do PhD, you typically need three letters of recommendation. So you would want to do another research position as well in order to get, other referrals. Um, Whether that position comes from, getting accepted at a conference here and having a better resume to get another position, or meeting someone at a conference to start doing research for them, that could be a possibility. But fundamentally, like PhD programs nowadays are extremely competitive for AI. So, you probably want to have a good amount of research experience and also, just a second or third referral.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Two more verbal questions, and then after that, I'll go ahead and go through all the public questions in the chat. Um, I guess Azan, if you want to unmute.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you. I have a couple questions. So starting off, given that I already have a specific research project in mind, how much flexibility do I have to pursue that independent concept with the team?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, if you have a specific idea in mind, if it's something that we think has potential that we can, shape into a conference, then we can, match you with other students who don't have very strong preferences or are interested in the topic that you have in mind already, and we can go and pursue it. But I guess that's always conditional on the feasibility of the idea. So, for example, I think some past students have had ideas on the top of their mind on, let's say, something medical related, but there's just like no data for it. Let's say, patient privacy or other reasons, there's just no data. Then in that case, there's just like no way to pursue the idea. Or maybe it's an idea that just doesn't have that much like novelty or merit. Then we won't be able to do it. But if there's something there and we can shape it into something novel, then we'd be happy to pursue it.
Two more questions. As a high schooler, what does the process look like from turning your Algoverse research into a ISEF project, in terms of like legalities and logistics?
Mhm. So yeah, our program is aimed for I guess, the top conferences. So we don't typically aim for ISEF. We have had some past students get into ISEF anyways. Like one of our students, let me see if I can find the paper actually. It was yeah, this one. Yeah, one of our past students got into ISEF this year. He also got into Stanford as well. Um, but yeah, I guess I don't really know the details there of what exactly the logistics look like. I think that the way it works on the top of my head is that for ISEF you can do group projects, and if you're in different regions, you have to pick one of the regions or something. I think the team limit is 3 or something like that. But yeah, I don't know the very specific details of that.
Final question. I know you mentioned that you pair high schoolers with other high schoolers. For this specific batch of enrollments, how many high schoolers have you accepted?
Yeah, we accept roughly uh, equal amounts of like high school versus college students, and then there's also a little bit of industry grad, so probably something like 45, 45, 10 in terms of the distribution. As for the current enrollment counts, I believe it's a few hundred, if I remember correctly, for the current cohort. Um, so yeah, as for the number of high schoolers, I guess you can roughly cut that in half, or maybe a little bit less than half of that.
Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. Okay, sorry. I know that I know Maliki and Jason, you also have your hands raised, but I just want to make sure I have enough time to go through the rest of the public questions. So I guess one more hand raised, Arohi, if you're here, if you want to unmute.
Yeah. So my question is, what is your admissions criteria? I applied earlier today and I went through the steps and it had like my resume and my transcript and everything. But are you looking for like, I wasn't sure if I missed like an essay or something. Yeah, so I guess what is your admissions criteria? And also, is your May 24th cohort now full and are you only accepting for cohorts after that? Yeah, that's it.
Mhm. Yeah, so for the admissions criteria, yeah, no essay. We actually used to have an essay, but it turns out people will just use ChatGPT for it, and then there's not too much signal there.
Yeah.
I guess yeah, the main criteria that we typically use is academic rigor. So, GPA, test scores, stuff like that. Past coding experience is something we index pretty heavily as well. And I guess there's different metrics we look at for merit scholarships. So like prior background in research and also Olympiad experience and stuff. That's something that's high signal for that. But besides that, just the primary things that we list on the application, I guess, are the things that we're looking for. So it's probably roughly what you would expect for what a program like this would look for.
Okay, cool. And then is your May 24th cohort full?
Oh yeah, I believe it's still open if I remember correctly. Whatever is on the portal should be the most recent. So it's possible that from the last time I checked, it might be closed now, but I think it's still open. It might close maybe like on the 23rd, like the Saturday.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and answer some of these public questions because I know some of these people have been waiting for quite a while. So let me go ahead and scroll to the top and see what's going on here. Let's see. Okay, very active chat. Okay, let's see. Okay, if the paper doesn't pass the peer review, is there any way to fix it and try again? That's right. So the way that it works is that if you get accepted, or if you get accepted, that's great, you're done. If you get rejected, then you get the reviews from the reviewers on what you should change for next time. So you should go ahead and revise based on the comments that they gave. We can also give another review and see what feedback we have on our end to see what could be changed. Sometimes this might involve writing some more experiments or running some more experiments and adding some more stuff to the paper. Sometimes if it's relatively minor things, you might not need to do much revision, and you can just go ahead and change the little things and then submit again. But yeah, you can definitely submit again to another conference. So let's say you get rejected from the NeurIPS workshop, then you could do some modifications and then submit to the AAAI workshops. Okay, does the missing 4 meetings rule account for people who are international and might have some time zone difficulties? Yeah, it's a good question. So if you are international, then you don't have to show up to the lecture check-ins that happen on Sundays or Saturdays, depending on the cohort. But you do still need to attend all the meetings with the mentors. So those would still count for attendance. Okay, what is the deadline for accepting the decision? I sent an email and I need a response to decide whether or not I can accept because it's okay. So yeah, to clarify, the deadline on the offer is like relatively flexible if you want to join one of the later dates. So whatever you've got on your email, let's say you want to join the July cohort, we can provide still some flexibility here because if the seats are still open, we're happy to reserve your spot. If your decision says it's due, like let's say today or yesterday, and then our admissions team are already out of office, then you can just assume based on what I said here that you'll get the extension. Yeah, I guess they typically work normal 9 to 5, and I guess this week is extremely busy with the amount of admissions we've been having, so they might take a little bit of time to respond. But yeah, feel free to follow up with them, and if you're blocked on them right now, you can feel free to assume that the deadline will be extended if you want to aim for one of the later start dates. Okay, how do doctoral programs and AI labs perceive the impact of publications for workshops versus conferences? That's a good question. I actually read an article about this some weeks ago, and I wish I had it in hand. Yeah, if I can find that, I'll maybe go send it to you. But I guess a short answer is that it still helps, of course. If you get main conferences, that's even better. That'd be really quite impressive. But if you get a workshop publication, that's still quite unique. That'll help you with getting into AI labs. Like for example, the students that we've had in the past who got into OpenAI, XAI, Anthropic, all 3 of those students actually got in via workshop papers. So, I think there's some fear that people have that the workshop papers are not as impressive and it's worse for career outcomes, but that's not true. We've had a lot of past students with workshop papers get really strong outcomes. Okay, question. So, are you saying this would help get references for PhD program? Okay, I think I answered this over verbal. Okay, question about the scholarship. Let's see. Okay, if I apply for scholarship, I'm waiting. Should I wait for the scholarship clarification before the deposit, or can we submit the deposit while the scholarship application is being reviewed? That's a good question. Yeah, if there is a deadline given from the admissions team, you could submit the deposit and then just follow up with them and make sure that they're reviewing the scholarship before you, actually are starting the program. Yeah, it's pretty flexible here because you could always either submit the deposit and then follow up with the scholarship / back out if need to, or you could just wait and then I guess try to enroll later if there's still spots. So I guess there's some flexibility here, but I probably recommend submitting the deposit and then following up to make sure that they do respond before the program begins, because the tuition fee gets started on the program start date, so you'll definitely need to hear back before then. Okay, do you have a number that I can contact about registration? I actually put it in the chat, so you can check that out if you scroll down the chat. Okay, how are the teams formed? Do students get to choose a PI? Do students? Okay, so I answered a few of these. The research groups are formed based on the team matching form and based on a bunch of criteria that we listed, like your topics of interest on. Do you get to choose your PI? We'll match based on the topics. So let's say you want to do interpretability, then we'll match you with Callum or Javier, one of our other interpretability PIs. Do students get to define their own projects with the guidance of a PI? Yeah, that's one option. If you have an idea or you have concepts in an idea, you can go ahead and talk with our PIs, get that shaped and get their feedback. What is the deadline to accept? That should be on your portal. So I'm not sure on the top of my head, but if you log in, you should be able to find it. Is it possible to get 100% scholarship? Yeah, I'll say it is possible, but it is quite rare and it's quite competitive. So, yeah, for reference, the financial aid scholarship, this is the opposite of the merit scholarship. We do actually prioritize new students for this to try to broaden access. But it's, yeah, just very competitive. Right now, we have tens of thousands of people applying. So, yeah, unfortunately, we just don't have the kind of funds for that to give everyone, full scholarships. Given that, I guess the way that our funding works is that it's via the tuition fees. So if no one's paying tuition, we have no money, and then we can't pay our mentors and stuff. So yeah, it's competitive, but if you can try to submit the application, that would be your best shot. Okay, is it possible to defer the offer to a later cohort? Yeah, that'd be possible. You can go ahead and email our admissions team, and you can move it to a later summer start date or one of the fall start dates if you want. Okay, what is your acceptance rate to main conference? Okay, I think I answered this over call. Which application or tool will be using for adding citations and references in the introduction or literature review? Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, this is pretty flexible here. The typical way that you do it is that there's something called BibTeX. If you go on Archive or Scholar, and on the right sidebar, you'll see this place where you can find the BibTeX of different past papers, and you can go ahead and add that to Overleaf. Overleaf is like the main platform. It's like Google Docs, but for LaTeX. And so you can go ahead and put all this stuff there. Yeah, I guess that's a pretty specific thing, and we can hop out of the program. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. That's usually not a very big point of concern when we're writing the paper. Okay, I think I answered the question before. Let's see. About the semantic self-consistency paper. Okay, that's a little bit specific, so I'll probably skip that for now, but maybe I can go back to it later. Let's see. Okay. More questions. Can we look at the slideshow after the meeting? Yeah, we'll send the recording over email. And I think we'll also include the slides as well. I'll tell the admissions team to make sure they include that. Okay. What would be the unique value for the Algoverse program be other than connecting us to the relevant mentors or professors? Let's see. So there's a few different things here, right? I guess the connection to the professors is great, but the main value that we provide is the help in learning how the research process works. So I guess beyond the outcomes and beyond the connections, in my mind, the value of actually knowing how to do research and thinking as a researcher, that has real value for your technical career in the future. Because more and more the question is not really about how to solve constraint problems. AI models are quite good at this, and they'll only get better. It's about how to think as a researcher, how to reason about uncertainty, how to reason in a landscape of tons of possible hypotheses. How do you have research taste? These are things that I think are best learned by having a mentor help give their mental models down. I guess, yeah, that's a relatively abstract thing, so it's not quite as concrete compared to, let's just say, like the paper at the value in a resume, which I think that obviously that could be helpful too for status signaling for your future internships and career options. But I guess that's sort of my philosophy for how the program has value. Okay, what's the last date to accept and install options for international students? So same thing for the previous response that I gave earlier. It should be on your portal, so you can go ahead and find it there. The installment options are either weekly, monthly, or one time. And then if you need a extra accommodation, sometimes we can extend the schedule to be over a longer period of time instead of 3 months. Okay, some more questions. Is the $50 deposit refundable? Yeah, if you refund before the program begins, then we can send the deposit back. Okay, let's see. Is there an interest fee for installments? There's not. Okay. We post about the presentation and meeting slides on LinkedIn. I guess you could. I mean, yeah, if you want, you could. Okay. I'm inspiring to be a software engineer. I want to focus on AI and ML. Is this research program actually worth it? Yeah, it's a good question. This is a very personal question. It depends on what exactly you're looking for, what your goals are. Based on the high level description that you described, like the information I have right now is that you want to be a software engineer and you want to focus on AI. With that in mind, then yeah, this is a pretty standard background of students who do the program and find value from it. As for whether it is specifically worth it for you, that'll depend on other things that I would want to learn more about. But I guess on a high level, given this prior, I would say potentially yes. Okay. Yeah, what are the installment plans? I missed that. Yeah, so the options are either weekly, monthly, or one time. They start on the program start date and go on for the 3 months. It's the same total amount. And then if you need to, sometimes we can accommodate having an extension to a longer period of time, like let's say 5 or 6 months. But for the sake of our logistics, we have most people just go with a standard plan. Okay, some questions in the private chat as well. Let's see. Yeah, that question, I'll respond to that one later. Okay, wanted to confirm if we have the option of joining the fall cohort. That's right. So if you want to defer your enrollment, yeah, we can go ahead and send you the other enrollment link instead, and you can go ahead and enroll in our fall cohort. That would be possible, yeah. You would not need to reapply. You could just email our admissions team, and we can go help you transfer it. Okay, I think I've answered all the questions in the chat. I guess Malik, if you want to unmute, I can answer your question.
Am I audible, sir?
What you said?
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was such a viable and interesting session. My question is about PhD. Actually, I'm pursuing my master in artificial intelligence from the National University, and I have a lot of rewards from the US top tier university. Like I'm also selected as a section leader in Stanford Code in Place. Also, I have participated in MIT coding competition. I also get UC Berkeley certificate in an allied algorithmic problem computation. So my main concern is about PhD, like how I will approach professor and ask about the funding to get a PhD in my relative field. And also I'm concerned about the recommendation, like I want to get LRR from the professor. So how this gonna be possible for me?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think my answer would be pretty similar to what I answered to Shikanth earlier. I guess fundamentally the grad school applications are quite competitive. We can help you out with, building up your research chops and your resume. We can also provide, if you work well on the project and contribute well, we can have one of our PIs have a letter of recommendation for you as well. But that's all part of a broader journey of what it takes to get into one of these grad school programs, especially as an international student. So we can help out as much as we can, but the learning of the research process and getting started with that. But yeah, just worth keeping in mind that in the grander scheme of things, that's one aspect of it.
Okay. And my second question is how to get a scholarship or PhD, like getting funding from professor. So is there any approach you have in mind?
Sorry, I think my audio has been cutting out a little bit, so I couldn't hear you too well. Can you say that one more time?
Actually, I'm asking about the funding for PhD. Like I want to pursue my PhD in the US on funding. So how I will approach the professor asking about the funding?
Oh, I see. I guess this is not really too specific to our program. If you're asking for the funding for PhD programs, so yeah, I guess yeah. I mean, I'll say that you can try to reach out to the professors and you can talk to them about your situation. Typically, PhD programs are funded, so that would be something that you could accomplish, or maybe you can try to do one of those external scholarships like the NSF. But that'd be ultimately the conversation that you'd want to have with the professor.
Okay, great. Thank you, sir.
Okay, no problem. Some of the other questions in the chat. So how responsive are the PIs between the scheduled meetings? How involved is the PI in the actual writing process versus the research direction? Yeah, good questions. So the PIs, you can still reach out to them. Typically, they talk more internally between the mentors and they talk more with our mentors compared to the students. But you could also talk with them as well. You could, ask your mentor to, surface any questions, and they're pretty responsive. Ask for how involved they are in the writing process. Typically, the mentor will be more involved in the bulk of the writing process, like actually getting it to a near polished state. And then the PI will go ahead and, from the roughly polished state, they'll try to give you some more feedback to get it to the fully polished state. So the PIs will be helping out with the more, I guess you could break it down to high level and low level feedback. Low level feedback would be the specific writing of different paragraphs and different things like that. But the high level would be how do you best frame the paper, and the results that you got? What are important things that you might be missing in the related works that they just might have context on, that let's say the LLMs aren't able to find. What would be other big takeaways from the experiments that you should be talking about, and what are things that, basically just how to frame it. I guess there is some marketing that gets involved with, how to best show off the results that you did show to the conferences, right? And that will depend on what the field has already shown, right? What is novel, what is something that people haven't seen before, and I think that's what they have the most domain knowledge on helping out with. Okay, getting a NeurIPS workshop or a conference submission wouldn't be possible in the fall, correct? Just double checking. So yeah, the fall would aim for different venues because that's just based on the timeline. In the fall, typically you'd want to aim for NACL and iClear. NACL is going into the weeds, but for the NLP conferences, there's an organization called the Association of Computational Linguistics, and there's different venues like EACL, NACL, and COLING, and these rotate. Typically, it's 2 versus 1 across every 3 years. So this year should be a NACL cycle, and that one will typically have due dates in maybe December or January, and iClear will have just due dates of January, February for the cohorts or for the workshops. I guess in theory you could submit to NeurIPS the next year because at that point you will have the final paper. But really I think a lot of times people will over-index on NeurIPS in particular because they hear of that one being the #1 conference. But I should emphasize again, in the field, NeurIPS, iClear, and ICML are about the same type of prestige. So I wouldn't worry too much about the specific conference name as long as it's within that list that I showed earlier.
Excuse me.
Hey, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I have 2 questions. So you mentioned that half the students are normally high schoolers. So I'm thinking about doing the July to October cohort. So how many people can I expect to be in one cohort?
Yeah, July cohort is typically not as active as the other ones, but probably it'll still be maybe 100-200 people, if I had to guess. Yeah, the specific team would be only 4 people though, so it'd just be you, 3 others, and then the mentor.
Okay, so how many teams do the mentors mentor at once, or is it just they're assigned to one team?
It depends on their bandwidth. So, oh yeah, so sorry. If you have to leave the call, definitely feel free. Yeah, don't want to hold you hostage here. Yeah, thanks for showing till the end, and definitely feel free to head out if you need to. But yeah, going back to your point, yeah, it depends on the bandwidth of the mentor. So some of the mentors are working full time at Algoverse. They work 40 hours a week, and so they have quite a bit of bandwidth to take multiple teams. Some mentors will just take one team. So there's a pretty big variance depending on what the mentor has bandwidth for.
Oh, okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem. Cool. All right. Well, hopefully this was helpful. I guess, okay, one final question. For those of us planning on enrolling to later cohorts, should we accept the offer displayed on that dashboard? Yeah, you could accept it and then we can transfer you manually. So you wouldn't need to worry about that. As long as you send us an email asking to move it. It's actually probably easier on our end for us to move you after we've accepted the deposit, because we already have you on our system in that case, and we can just transfer you. Both orders are fine, but yeah, there is no harm in submitting the deposit, and we can transfer you. But yeah, I guess thanks again for attending. I know this was quite a long session and quite impressed with your attention span for staying this long. If you have any other questions, definitely feel free to either email the admissions team or you can follow up on my number that I sent. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Have a good night and hope to see you in the program. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.